Welcome to Paranormal Conversations. Random, off-the-cuff discussions on all things paranormal.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to Paranormal Conversations number 25. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
This Paranormal Conversation is going to be a little bit different than our other ones. All of them are kind of off the cuff, and we're picking the brains of paranormal enthusiasts that we have join us. You are well aware of the two that are going to be joining us on this Paranormal Conversation, Jerry and Tracy Paulley of the Hillbilly Horror Stories Podcast. We share an audience, so you've probably heard of them. If you haven't, you're going to really love them. And we decided we wanted to do a collaboration. And what we ended up doing it about is there's this new horror movie that just came out on Netflix called The Deliverance. And it's about this haunting that took place in Gary, Indiana. It's very loosely based on that story. Zak Bagan's made a documentary about this house, and he called the documentary Demon House. So I was like, Jerry, why don't we talk about the movie, discuss some of the truth behind the actual movie, and talk a little bit about demon possession. I think you guys are going to really find this to be a fascinating discussion. And let us know what you think about this kind of thing. Do you like these kinds of discussions? If you do, we'll do more of them.
Hey guys, this is another edition of our collaborations. And this collaboration is with Diane and Kelly from History Goes Bump. Near and dear to our heart. They've been doing this for, what are we looking at? 10 years?
Almost 10 years, yep.
10 years. They've been had fantastic success. They've been very steady over the years. Very hard to do for this very long period of time. So they have nothing but the respect from us. And they were a big help to us when we got started out. So we thought it would be fun after doing some live events to actually have them on with this collaboration. When I approached Diane and Kelly about this, Diane had an idea of more of a roundtable discussion of possession, things like that. This is on the verge, obviously, of the movie just coming out of the LaToya Ammons case, which I felt was nowhere near the LaToya Ammons case. I know I come at things a different direction than what Diane does, than what Kelly does probably, than what Tracy does. So she thought it would be fun just to get a big mixture of opinions. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Diane and Kelly from the History Goes Bump podcast.
Well, Jerry and Tracy, you guys know we love hanging out with you. And now that we managed to get you down here to Florida, we get to do it a little bit more often in person.
Absolutely.
Which is great. Of course, we're not doing this in person.
In fairness, you guys are kind of the reason we moved down to Florida. You were a big part of it, probably 60 to 70%.
And if we'd only had a beach in our backyard, we probably could have gotten you in the same town. Because we know that Claremont was kind of a place where you've hung out and you kind of like the city. So we had you almost right there where we could just like run over and get a cup of sugar when we needed it.
Nah, no, man. That would have been awesome, right?
That Claremont's too snooty and unaffordable for us.
Well, it's getting kind of that way. And there's so many people here. It's like if they see a patch of ground that doesn't have a building on it, they put a building on it.
Super happy.
Kind of crazy.
Super happy that we have the park across the street with all the lakes and everything, because at least we have that wildlife there.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Before we jump into this, I do, of course, want to do a spoiler warning because I know we're going to get into talking about specifics about the movie. So if you have not seen it, we would advise that you, if you have Netflix, watch The Deliverance so that we don't spoil anything for you before you listen to this. It was really cool because we were trying to think of what do we want to do as a collaboration. And I saw that Jerry had mentioned on Facebook that he had watched The Deliverance, and Kelly and I had literally just watched it that same day. So we're like, oh wow, he watched the same movie we did. And I was like, you know what? We should see if Jerry and Tracy would be interested in talking about the movie. And, you know, Jerry and Tracy, when it comes to these based on a true story, we've come to find, I think with most movies that it's, what exactly do you mean like based? Like you didn't actually come up with the original idea? And so that's why it's based on a true story, because a lot of these movies that do that, it's really, really loosely based. And this one clearly was very loosely based, I would have to say, especially based on the research that you guys have done on this. Kelly and I have never covered this particular house before, so we didn't know a whole lot about it. And we didn't even know that's what this movie was about. So we sit down, we turn on Netflix. We're like, well, what do we want to watch? We just finished a series. And I was like, oh, here's a new horror movie that they just dropped. Why don't we turn that on? The Deliverance. It's probably something about demon possession. And we got about 5 minutes in. And I looked at Kelly and I went, I wonder if this is that house in Gary, Indiana. I know Jerry and Tracy have covered it. And didn't Zak Bagan make a documentary about it? Sure enough, the demon house. And he even bought it and then demolished it and has some of the stuff at his haunted museum from it. So we're watching it. And first of all, I thought it was a pretty good movie. What did you think?
I thought it was a good movie. I thought it got towards the end, without spoiler alerts, I thought it got a little over the top, I guess we'll say. But overall, I thought it was a good movie. I liked the first 75% better than I liked the last 25%.
Yeah,
I would agree.
I'll agree with that as well. If you're just looking at it from strictly an entertainment standpoint, taking it for what it is, a movie, versus whether it was very factually based.
And that's the way it gets with a lot of these demon possession movies. I mean, we start off with The Exorcist, and of course, that's like the king of the demon possession movies out there. And that one, of course, was based on a true story as well, only it was a little boy in St. Louis that actually had it going on. And when you listen to the stuff that happened to him versus what happened in the movie did overblow a few things, but it sounded pretty intense, whatever he had gone through as well. However, this one, I was like, I don't know how much of this is actually the real deal, but what was cool about this story with LaToya Amons, this goes back to 2011, is that they had people that you trust. You know, when you hear stories from police officers or government officials, firefighters, we always look to those like, well, it seems like there's a lot more legitimacy to it because we trust these people. It's not going to help them in any way to tell a story, especially something about demon possession. And there's 800 pages of official records here. And a lot of it's coming from the Department of Human Services and that kind of thing. So you're like, well, something really did happen here. I always get torn when it comes to these demon possession things, because what are your feelings on the Warrens?
Tracy, what do you think about the Warrens?
I have mixed feelings about them. I mean, I feel like I want to believe what they do and what they find, but I don't know. Kind of still feel iffy about it.
I think they were opportunists.
Is that what you think?
Yeah, I don't feel like that. I mean, you can't just take some classes and do some stuff, call yourself a demonologist like Ed did, basically. And then, he had met Lorraine, which from my understanding, she wasn't a medium back when they met, but she became a medium. And that doesn't say that, not to say that that couldn't happen, that there weren't things there all along that she just developed, but it just seems too convenient. Most of the people that they dealt with didn't really have a lot of kind of things to say about them. They felt like they were opportunists. When you look at the, family from The Conjuring, that was another one of those situations where they just weren't, it was like they were pushy. It was like, hey, we got something here. Let's make it into something more. They were almost more like P.T. Barnum than, parapsychologists.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I feel like maybe there was a little bit more legitimacy right in the very beginning with them, but I definitely have that same feeling of opportunistic for what they ended up graduating into.
I agree. I want to think that in the beginning, they were trying to be legitimate, really wanting to help people. Anytime I hear people go into places and everything's a demon, it always makes me kind of question where they're coming from, because as far as I'm concerned, especially in our personal experience, we've never run into anything like that. There's two extremes. You have some people on one side that say there's no demons, there's no such thing as that, and doesn't happen. And then you have other people where they're on the extreme of everything's a demon, there is no such thing as ghosts, and it's just demons impersonating spirits or what have you. And then there's the rest of us that kind of fall somewhere in between, where I definitely believe that there's some mean spirits that are human spirits that were just mean in real life. And then I do believe there are some evil entities out there. For me personally, I have kind of a weird, a different kind of fringy interpretation of what a demon is. Whereas most people think there's some kind of a fallen angel or something. I don't believe that, because I think that angels can actually take on a bodily form if they want to, just based on, I don't know if you guys have ever done a show on angelic encounters or people who have seen angels or anything like that.
We've done a little bit on them. We did the Cokeville Miracle, which was the school where the kids say they were saved by angels. We covered that. And then we've covered some near-death experiences to where people say that they saw heaven, and then we've seen the opposite side. We covered some of that. And then we've done some people that feel like that they've had guardian angels that helped them in situations.
And it seems like a lot of these stories, it's something bodily. Like for me personally, I think I had an encounter with an angel. I needed somebody to push my car because it was just me and I really needed some help. And all of a sudden there was this guy that was at the back of my car pushing it. And I have no idea where he came from. We got it around this building and parked in the back. And I jumped in to stop the car so that it wouldn't run into the back of the building. And when I got out of the car, I was looking around. I'm like, where did he go? Because I was going to thank him, maybe give him some money or something.
Oh my God.
And he was just gone. And I was just like, I looked around the building. I looked down the street. And I'm like, I don't know where he went, but I did say, God, I really need some help right now. So I think it was an angel. I can't, say for sure, but it was definitely somebody bodily. So I think angels can take on a bodily form. Whereas demons, anytime we hear anything about a demon, it seems like it's possessing somebody or having to jump into something. So I think they're a disembodied entity that it can't have a body unless it takes over a body. And that's why they possess people. Because why would a spirit want to go inside somebody else's body? Especially if you have a body, you don't need one. So this is an entity that needs a body. In the Bible, there's Noah's flood. And the reason why I think the flood happened is because you had fallen angels that did come down. They saw these earth chicks, thought they were hot, wanted to have some kids.
Hot earth chicks.
Mated with them. And they had these kids that are called the Nephilim. And they appear in the Bible as these giants. So like David and Goliath was a Nephilim. Well, where are these spirits coming from? Like, I believe, God gives everybody a soul or a spirit. And so we have that. But if you're something that is outside of that kind of creation, what do you have? It's some kind of part of you that can't be redeemed. So these are what I think are the spirits of these Nephilim that are just hanging out. They're in the abyss. It's like a desert, so they're very thirsty. And when they get a chance to get in a body, you guys probably have heard the story in the Bible where Jesus encounters this guy who has these demons in him, and he asks, "Who are you?" And it says Legion. So there's a whole bunch of them in there, and he's going to cast them out. Well, and they say, "Oh, please don't send us back to the abyss," because they don't want to go back to that desert kind of place. So they're like, "Will you put us in those pigs over there?" Which doesn't make much sense, because then the pigs run off the cliff and I'll die. So I guess their disembodied spirits are floating around again. But what was interesting about the thought about that they're in this desert place is at the very beginning of the Deliverance, you see that the little boy, I think it's probably the youngest one, goes to the refrigerator and he opens it up and he just starts downing milk like crazy. I mean, it's just pouring down his face. It's all over the floor because he's just so thirsty. And so I was like, oh, well, at least they kind of got that right, that whatever's in him that has entered him is very, very thirsty. And that's why. So that's just kind of how I interpret what a demon possession is. When it comes to children being possessed, I honestly don't know how that happens. Jerry, with some of the truth behind this story, can you share a little bit about like some of the true stuff that actually happened, especially with this youngest child? I think he's the one that the Department of Children's Services saw walking up a wall or something.
Yeah, from my understanding, and I'll be honest with you, I reposted the episode, but I didn't go back and listen to it. So some of my details might be a little sketchy, but what I did remember was the little boy was the one who started kind of everything. I didn't remember a whole lot with the other children. It was all primarily him. They had the children's service was coming by and checking on them. I don't know if it was for the reasons said in the movie, because I didn't remember LaToya Ammons having like this really rough background where she had like parole officers and everything floating around. I didn't remember that being the case with her. In fact, she was the religious one. And that was one of the things that she got in trouble for in the end of it when they were after all this stuff started. And then because I think most of the stuff got turned over to Child Protective Services after these events started happening. I don't think they were just randomly already coming around. And one of the things that they found out is, as punishment, she would make the kids read Bible verses out loud or write Bible verses. And that was one of the things that when it was all said and done, they took the kids away from her and gave them back conditionally on the fact that she kind of dropped her whole religious part. She could no longer use religion in her punishment. She could no longer force religion on the kids. And they were trying to say that they felt like she caused these things to happen because she put so much pressure and forced so much religion on them that they kind of manifested these things. Look, I'm not the most religious person in the world. We know this. We've talked about this. But I don't think it's a judge or a court's place to tell somebody that they can't use religion in their house, or they shouldn't use religion in their punishments, or you have to back off your religion to be able to see your kids. I don't think that should ever be the case, because I don't know what really exists and doesn't exist. I'd like to think there's a higher power, and I think in some way, shape, and form there are. But the courts shouldn't be the one to say, well, we know for a fact it's not because we're a court, so you can't have this. I think that's crazy. They did see the little boy in the hospital. Nurses and the lady from social services did see the little boy climbing up the wall. The police officer saw all kinds of stuff. I was amazed at what was left out of the movie that actually would have been important stuff. The police officer was a huge part of the real story. This guy had been on the force for like 40 years. I think it was his last year before he retired. And he saw all this stuff and he reported all this stuff. They didn't even have the police officer in the movie at all. He wasn't even represented by anybody.
I just wanted to break in here really quick to back up what Jerry is saying here. The cops experienced paranormal activity in the house. During an interview that they did with LaToya's mother, one of the officers' audio recorders malfunctioned, and this is kept in the Austin and Hammond police records. The power light flashed to indicate the batteries were dying, even though the officer had placed fresh batteries in the recorder earlier that day. Another officer recorded audio, and when he played it back later, heard an unknown voice whisper, "Hey." And this was according to Lake County police records. That officer also took photos of the house. In one photo of the basement stairs, there was a cloudy white image in the upper right-hand corner. When an officer enlarged the photo, that cloud appeared to resemble a face. Lake County police records also state that fact. The enlargement also revealed a second green image that police say looked like a female. The officer that Jerry's talking about here is Gary Police Captain Charles Austin, and he was a 36-year veteran of the Gary Police Department. And he at first thought LaToya Amons was making up the story, but after several visits to their home and interviews with witnesses, Austin said simply, "I am a believer." He had car troubles after being at the house that were unexplainable. And all kinds of other issues happened to him too when he was off the property. So it was like whatever was there had followed him back to his house, or when he was on his way driving to and from the Amons house.
There was stuff like an oil that would drip from the blinds on the windows. They couldn't figure out where it was coming from, but it was almost like an anointing oil. They didn't feature that in the movie. I thought that would have been something cool to show in the movie. And like I said, I don't expect a movie that's based on a true story to be 100% accurate. I don't even expect it to be 70% accurate. If anything, I learned that from the Queen movie. I mean, think about this.
True. Yeah.
Bohemian Rhapsody. I'm not getting off subject, but I'm proving a point here, kind of. Bohemian Rhapsody, if anybody's seen that or hasn't seen it, in the beginning, Freddie Mercury went to a show to one of the band, or the band mostly the same band, but without him. Different lead singer. Lead singer quits. He meets up with them afterwards and pretty much says, "Hey, you need a new lead singer. I sing. Let me get an audition." The reality of it was, Freddie knew the band backwards and forwards. They all knew each other. They hung out together. So it's like, I didn't really understand why they had to make it that. And it was for dramatic reasons. But I didn't understand the point of making it that. But even more importantly, when Freddie found out later he had AIDS, then the movie, they said, okay, let's make it to where we're going to Live Aid. We haven't played together in forever. So we're going to come out and do this. And Freddie's got AIDS, but he doesn't want to tell anybody. None of that was true. They were actually on tour when Live Aid happened. So they had been playing together. They did know that Freddie had AIDS at the time that happened. So that wasn't a big surprise. And I think the other one that threw me off that I didn't understand why it was in the movie was, when they came up with We Will Rock You, they were like, oh, we came up with this at this time. And in reality, We Will Rock You came out like 2 years before that. I just don't understand what the point of changing the timeline on that had anything to do with the movie, because it would have been the same if they'd done it 2 years earlier. That's my point, is when it comes to these Hollywood renditions, they're going to change stuff. And it's not going to be exactly the same, but that going into it. I felt like this movie created a very unfair image of LaToya Ammons. I thought it made her out to be the biggest, worst mom on the face of the earth. I mean, she was always cussing at her kids. She was smacking them. She was, but the reality of it was, I don't think that was the case at all. I think she was super religious. Now, did that mean that she doesn't discipline her kids, or she wasn't maybe a little harder than she should be? I'm sure she probably was, but I don't think it was like she was depicted in the movie. I told Tracy after the movie, I said, she should probably sue them for how they depicted her in this movie.
Yeah, because I even said, oh my God, she is so hateful. Why is she so mean, But
we were like you guys. I was probably 20 minutes in before I realized that was a movie about their case. It was so different, but then I started seeing similarities. And I told Tracy, I said, this sounds like the Demon House story. And as it moved on, that's the way it came to be. But yeah.
Yeah, I was a little slow at first, I thought, but it got into it, got better.
They definitely took, what is it called?
Liberties?
Yeah, liberties or
creative liberties.
Creative liberties or license. Yeah.
Well, I agree with you, Jerry. I never understand why they change core elements of something, especially if it's like something that's really good. I could see if you fast forward things or cut out things that, we really don't need to know or something like that. But when you just whole cloth make up stuff that you don't have to make up, because like I said, we didn't really know a whole lot about this case. I mean, I listened to your show way back when you had it, years ago. So I wasn't as familiar with the mother and stuff. And when I was watching it, I'm like, okay, well, she's a drunk. She's physically abusive, because how are they going to prove that this is a demon that's actually hurting these children? Because if you've got an abusive mom, well, how do we know that she's just not beating them and blaming it on something else? So then you don't even know why in the world are we even thinking that there's anything demonic going on here. And the other thing I really don't understand, what the hell was with Glenn Close in this movie? I mean, her mom was not a white woman. And she certainly, they present her as Glenn Close basically as a floozy, is the way I interpreted it. So I'm like, what was the point of that whole thing?
Star power.
I guess.
That's probably what it was. But I mean, I'm sure they could have probably found an African-American woman that could have played that part. And, Glenn Close is a great actress, and she played the part well.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
But like I said, again, that's just another facet that was not the way that it is.
Yeah, twisting the story, and like Jerry said, not including some of the really important parts that would have added to it, and it would still be part of their original story. The reality part.
Another part of it that I was surprised that they changed, which again had no reason to change, was when it came time to try to get rid of the spirit. They actually brought in a priest. I believe he was an Italian priest. He was a white guy. But yet they changed it to a black woman that was more of a shaman. And the whole thing was, well, you got something different in your house and it's going to take a different approach. I mean, I don't understand why they had to change that part. Like I said, they literally changed every aspect from LaToya Ammons' personality, to her religious status, to her mom and the way her mom was. Because I don't think in the original story, her mom, I don't think that LaToya and her mom had all those differences like they tried to make out in the movie. And then they change the whole who was trying to exorcise the entity out. They didn't include the cop, which was one of the biggest parts of the first story as far as credibility wise.
Mhm.
So other than the kid crawling up the wall and the social worker seeing it, I wouldn't have even known it was that story.
Exactly. And you think how awful this is for this poor mother, Latoya, because you've got to be frustrated. You don't know what is happening to your children. You're also you're living in an economic condition where most people are like, and we've watched this with other hauntings. Why don't you just get out of that house? If it's that
Yeah.
crazy, just move. Well, some people
Can't
that
afford
is not an option for you.
No.
You've either put all your money into a house if you've bought it, or if you're renting a house, it's, you're going to lose your deposit, or you don't have them, you got to have first and last month's rent and another deposit and everything. It's just not feasible. And so you see that this woman is in this place where she doesn't know what's happening. And it seems to me like the real story, it wasn't just the little boy that was affected. I think she had said that she had some stuff that happened to her too. And I don't know, did they ever, and I don't know if you remember, Jerry, did they ever figure out what the backstory was here? Why this house had something going on here? Did they have, I know that they talked about that they'd seen some markings of maybe there were some rituals that were done down in the basement. So I don't know if some previous tenants had done some stuff in here that had invited things in. But I don't think that there was like this big murder story like what they presented in the movie.
Now, a paranormal investigator said there was up to 200 spirits in the house. But the landlord said there were never any issues before she moved in. And even after she moved out, there were no issues. Of course, Zak came in, bought the place and had it, demolished. But the landlord seems to act like there was nothing except for her time there.
So it's almost like they're trying to say something was just connected to her. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
This is something I started thinking about earlier and I've never thought about before, but for some reason, it entered my mind earlier. Do you think, because there are different types of possessions, there are possessions like a jinn that might need, somebody that's more Islamic to cover it, or, you see the demons that are, usually it's a Catholic priest, or maybe it's something that needs a rabbi. Do you think it's possible that some of these possessions are more manifested from your religious upbringing to where they're kind of created in what you know, rather than being an actual demon or a jinn or, a Dybbuk or whatever the case is? Is that a possibility?
What a great question. I absolutely love that because it hadn't really occurred to me, because we do know that different religions look at things differently. Like the Catholics, they have their whole setup for an exorcism and they have this whole thing that you go through. Protestants, most of the time, a Protestant church doesn't even want to deal with this kind of thing. And I think that was one of the things that she ran into in real life too, is she would take it to a church and they were like, I can't help you with that. And that's legit. Most churches are like, don't talk to me about ghosts. Don't talk to me about demons. I don't want to have anything to do with the supernatural, even though clearly they believe in a lot of supernatural stuff. I mean,
I don't want to talk about the
again.
supernatural, but let's talk about this guy we've never seen before and his son that rose from the dead 3 days later. And
Right.
But they're always like, don't talk about it. But generally speaking, if a Protestant is going to come at it, they're going to just be like, get the hell out in Jesus' name, and they're done with it. Whereas the Catholics are going to spend days and weeks and go through this whole thing and the holy water and all that stuff. Jews have an interesting way where they believe it's like a sick spirit that needs help. So they want to help the person who has been infected, I guess, by whatever this spirit is, but they also want to heal the spirit too. So they don't just treat it like it's an evil spirit. They just want to be helpful, whatever they can do. You have Native American shaman. They obviously are going to come at it from a different way. And jinn, again, you'd have somebody from the Islamic religion probably coming in and doing their own thing. Although it seems like all these spirits are kind of similar. It's almost like tulpas, are you helping to manifest something a little bit because that's what you understand, which again makes us wonder, spirits, is it we're manifesting something because that's what we understand a ghost or a spirit to be? Because we love to ask people, what do you think a ghost is? And we get all these different answers about it. But a lot of it comes from, what is your basic belief? We don't have a lot of Islamic people that we talk to, but if you were over in the Middle East, they're not going to say ghost or spirit. They're going to say jinn, because that's the way they understand these disembodied spirits, as being something like that. So I think it is possible that you're manifesting what you understand. So maybe because she was so religious with having 200 spirits in this house, that's what was being manifested there. I don't know.
And we all know the human brain is extremely powerful. So it's one of those things where we really won't know until we know. And will we care at that point?
Well, I'm going to care.
Well,
I've waited too long to find out.
What's interesting is I had seen that too, that the landlord had said, nothing was going on here until she was here. And obviously, when it comes to Zak Bagan, we question a lot of stuff there.
No.
But
really?
What is weird about this case is that I didn't realize until I started looking into him making the documentary and that he had shut himself up in this house. He wears those prism glasses now because he went cross-eyed and he's got like double vision or something like that. Well, this is what did that to him, apparently, is when he went into this house, that happened. And I just feel like it's a really, really, really elaborate hoax for you to be wearing these really stupid glasses, because they're not cool glasses that he's always wearing now. It feels like something really happened to him. Now, when it comes to him, I don't know. Is it just because he's always going after these things?
Antagonizing.
Following him and attaching to him from somewhere else?
I bang on Zak all the time. I don't like Ghost Adventures. Ever since Nick Groff left, it's too over the top for me. I don't like the way he antagonizes, as Kelly said. He doesn't treat entities, spirits, however you want to term it, with respect. And that's something I just can't get over. As a person, he might be a great dude. I don't know. Doubt it from stuff that I do know. But he is a great marketer. And he is an entertainer. And I put that as first and foremost on his list above problem solver. And I'll say this with all due respect. As much as I bang on him, I did think that Demon House was pretty decent. I thought he did a pretty good job with the documentary. It didn't seem to be as over the top as normal. He seemed to explain stuff. Do I believe everything that he says happened from his eyesight and all that? I don't know. It's Zak at the end of the day, so he is what he is. He's a marketer.
Mm-hmm.
But I did think he did a pretty good job with it. And I don't know why I watched it, because normally I won't watch anything with him in it, but I did watch it. And I thought it was pretty good.
I'd heard that it was, I haven't actually seen it, but I heard it was like the second documentary that he's ever made. And there were a lot of people who said, yeah, it was really well done and that kind of thing. Again, it seems very elaborate to me that you would go to all the trouble to have to keep wearing these glasses. Because I would think if you were faking the thing, you would at least come out later and say, I had some kind of eye surgery that fixed it. So you have to wear those stupid glasses all the time. So I feel like something really happened there. I just don't know if it was him causing it to happen, because I think a lot of the stuff that ends up happening is because he's got all kinds of weird stuff going on with him. I find it interesting that he did end up demolishing the house, which you would think he would almost rather be like, hey, now we've got this place, we could just bring in all these investigators and we can make some more money on it. And he decided to demolish it and just keep some of the stuff and take it back to his haunted museum.
And it's a very small house too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was the other thing that was really weird about the movie, is when you see it, it's like, it's a big house, it's a big 2-story. And so that already in your brain is going, this doesn't really show a woman who's having to live on a street where it's, these single-story, not shacks, but they're, not really nice houses. Big difference. I mean, the house in the movie looked like a really nice house, and so again, it causes that feeling where you're like, well, why don't you just get the hell out of the house if it's causing these issues, especially if they're taking your kids away from you.
Well, I've been to Gary, Indiana numerous times. There is, usually no matter what city you go to, there's a good part, there's a bad part, but there is no good part of Gary, Indiana. So it's, at the time I went through there, we're talking 20 some years ago, Michael Jackson was huge. They can't stand Michael Jackson in Gary, even though he's from there. because of the fact that they said he never really gave back. And they felt like he could have really helped the city, but he didn't. At the time that I went through there, it was the murder capital of the United States, and there were billboards to prove it. So they had more murders per capita. Almost every street you went down, all the businesses were either closed, boarded up. They all had bars in the windows, even if they were. I mean, it just so that part, just saying, that was pretty legit about the movie. It may even be worse than they depicted it in the movie.
Yeah, I would probably, based on what you're saying there, yes, it definitely. The other thing that you run into when you have these demon possession cases, especially I think in the past, is that a lot of people would say that somebody was mentally ill. And I think LaToya kind of ran into that a little bit, is that a lot of the hospital staff and everything were thinking, okay, this woman has got some kind of a mental issue. And maybe one of the kids has some mental issues or whatever. And maybe she's coaching the kids. But when you think about what was going on here, especially her children being taken away from her, it's one thing, like I asked you about the Warrens, because these are people who are almost glorifying these kinds of cases and wanting to get them out there and have all the newspapers covering it because they're making money off this stuff. They want it to be made into movies and things like that. This is not the case with her. She wasn't making any money off this. She wasn't getting famous off this. It certainly wasn't behooving her to put this idea out there that these demons are attacking her and her children. And so it's like, why do you think that she would be coaching her children to do this kind of thing? She couldn't have been coaching them. You'd said that it was mostly just the young kid that seemed to be hit with this. In the movie, they present it like all the kids in the different places that they were in were having issues.
Well, I think the episode where the older boy was the older son, I should say, was choking the other kid or what. There was an incident where I think well, in the movie it was drowning. It seemed to me like it was a choking situation in real life rather than a drowning, but I think that part actually happened. I think the other kids were affected, but not to the level of the little boy. But I'm going off memory here. Like I said, I could go back and listen to the episode and say, damn, I missed this and this and this. And
I mean, the good news in the end is that I'm glad that these people actually got to witness some of this stuff. It was kind of fun in the movie. You have, I'm trying to think if it was, who was the guy? Was it the doctor who went up to the nurse and was asking, or was it a security guard?
Oh, yeah. Where she said that she wasn't going to go back.
I'm not going back in that room.
Right. Yeah.
And so I love that was in the movie, because you kind of get the feeling that in reality, it had to have been that way too. Because this little boy is like, he's cussing at them, which you normally would think would be happening. He's hissing. Supernatural strength is going on. And this happens in a lot of these cases. As a matter of fact, I have this book called The Ghost Files, and Jeff Belanger wrote it, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Speaking of ghost adventures, he does most of the writing for it. That's why they actually get some of their history accurate, is because Jeff is actually doing that.
I've had Jeff on the show. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he is a nice guy. And he'd written this book, which was based off of, I think it was called The Ghost Village. He had one of the first websites out there that was, I guess they called them forums. Some of the younger listeners will have no idea what a forum is, but before there was Facebook or Reddit, any of that kind of stuff.
Or going into the way, way, way back machine.
There were these forums where you could go on and there were topics and you could comment on them and stuff. And Jeff Belanger basically, I would say, had the first paranormal one, and people could go on there and share their stories. And he started that back in I think it was 1999 or something like that. But he was talking on here, and John Zaffis is the nephew of the Warrens. And I actually feel like he's legit. I don't know how he feels about his aunt and uncle. He was close to him, so I'm sure he wants to believe that they were legit. Some of their stuff, he had taken care of their museum with their haunted stuff and everything. And he talked about one of the more harrowing exorcisms that he had assisted in. So he'd watched this kind of stuff, and he said a little woman, I think she was about 5'2", and I don't think she was 80 pounds soaking wet. They had her in a straitjacket in a pew, so they were in a church, and there was a bunch of guys holding her down. This woman went really under possession. She was able to pull the pew right up, breaking the restraints. So she's in a straitjacket. She breaks the restraints, gets out of the straitjacket, pushes all the guys away, and she stood there and spoke with this voice that was just so peering, it just blew your mind.
Wow.
And this is like happening in a church. So it's like, this stuff is just crazy, these things that could happen. And then there was this other guy that had put a comment on the forum, and he said, I've been a paranormal investigator for many years now. And yes, there truly are demons. During my years of investigating, I've encountered maybe 2 true possessions. That was enough. It was absolutely ghastly. I never intended to become an exorcist, but after many sessions with my priest, I learned the basics of simple exorcisms, not actually ordained by the church, but tolerated. It can be an experience that will shake the very foundation of your soul. I found that ghosts usually haunt a certain place, either residually or passively. A demon, on the other hand, will follow a person from place to place. Yes, demons are real, and no amount of letters after a person's name or any kind of ologist can convince me otherwise. So, I mean, these are people who, have these experiences on a regular basis. So, I don't know, Jerry, what do you think? Do you think that they really were having some kind of demonic possession going on in this family? And Tracy, you too. What do you think?
I just don't see how it cannot be that. It cannot be an exorcism. I mean, the person, you know what I'm saying? I don't know how anybody can make that up, how you could do that. It takes a strong person to do that exorcism because like that kid, I mean, what do you do after that? You know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't know. I would not want to see one for sure. What about, do you want to see one, Jerry, just to say you've seen one? You do?
Yeah, I want to see one.
Might jump right into you, though. You got to watch out.
Yeah.
That's true.
Good luck.
I mean, I kind of do, but then I'm afraid that it will traumatize me for my life. So, but I know there are people that do them. What's his name? Father Gary. Didn't he? He was
Father
on
Gary
the show,
Thomas.
right? Yeah, and then he had spoken how he had done one.
Oh, he'd done a
Right.
whole bunch of them. He's the most.
Well, I was going to say
He's the most renowned exorcist in the United States.
Right. So, I mean, I guess you just get used to it. I don't know. I don't know how you can go in time and time again to do exorcisms on people. I just don't know how you do it. I would think that it would just freak with your mind or something.
Do I think that there was possession going on in the house and that's what caused everything? I don't know. Because if it wasn't for the kid being seen climbing up the wall,
Yeah.
I might be inclined to believe the courts in the fact that if she really was using religion for everything in the house and everything had a biblical reference and every punishment had something to do with the Bible, everything had some kind of a religious aspect, maybe that's a little bit overload for kids. And maybe they would have a negative response to having it forced on them to that level. It's one thing to say, hey, we're going to church 3 times a week because this is what our religion believes we should do. Because I had some friends that grew up Pentecostal and they would go to church like 3 times a week, 3-4 hours at a time. And they didn't like it, but they still had plenty of time to do other stuff. I'd imagine they might have looked at it different when every time they were home, every punishment involved the Bible, or every movie they watched, or every time they flipped on the radio, it had to be Christian music and it couldn't be this and it couldn't. If that's all you were allowed to do is religion, maybe they had a negative response to it and acted out. We all know poltergeist activity for the most part is done from somebody going through a traumatic time with their mind, especially teenagers. Put 3 teenagers together.
Yeah.
Or the one, I don't know if the little boy was a teenager, but you put 3 people in the house that are all having the same kind, I'd imagine that could stir up some stuff.
Yeah, but how do you explain him walking up the wall?
That's the part that's what I said. You take that away from it, it's a whole different story. But
because that's my thing. If these priests are doing these exorcisms and they see stuff like that, I mean, there's nothing else that's going to make them do it. I don't think. What could make them do that?
Well, I don't even know how having a demon in you can help make you defy the laws of physics and climb up a wall.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Maybe he had really good sneakers. I don't know.
I mean, how high was the ceiling?
Right.
Supposedly he walked up the wall to the ceiling. So I'm like, if it was a low ceiling, maybe he was able to do it. I don't know.
I mean, if you're in a corner and you're using your feet, you can do it. But my understanding was, and I'm not trying to be funny here, my understanding was he wasn't in a corner. If you're in a corner, you can put your feet on both sides of the wall and you can walk yourself up.
Right.
But my understanding it was he went straight up the wall
Yeah.
on a straight side. So
Our youngest one did that in the hallway archway. We didn't have him exercised.
But he was doing exactly what you said there,
Yeah.
Jerry. He was putting
Wow.
his hands and his feet against the wall
Yeah.
to go up.
yep.
Well, and the interesting thing is he was also holding his grandmother's hand, I think, at the time and never let go of it. So he went up backwards up the wall.
Yeah, so he wasn't even
flips
using one of his
over.
hands.
Yeah. And then
I don't
is
remember
back
that
down on
part.
the ground again. So I'm like, the fact that he was able to hold on to her hand the whole time and then flipped over backwards, I agree with you, Jerry. When if that wasn't a part of this, because we are open-minded skeptics. And it's funny, I used to be really, really skeptical. And then as we started having experiences, I became more of a believer. And now I'm going back more towards the skeptical. It's funny how that works. If I hadn't had some of the experiences I've had, I would have a hard time believing that there were ghosts, that kind of thing. We haven't seen a full-bodied apparition, but I've had enough experiences that I can't explain that I'm like, there's something to it. Now, I've never had an experience with anything that I would call demonic, but I have friends who've been missionaries and have gone to, especially other countries, have gone to like Africa and stuff. And the things that they describe that they've seen, you're like, yeah, that sounds like demon possession. But then you have other things like, I'm not a Catholic, but I've heard that anytime somebody gets baptized in the Catholic Church, that they'll do an exorcism at the same time that they're doing the baptism, just to make sure that they get any evil stuff out of there. So then it kind of puts in your brain, well, does that mean that if you're not a believer in the Christian faith, that you have demons in you? I mean,
Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I'd read somewhere and I'm like, well, I didn't know that Catholics do that. So I've always had a really hard time believing specifically in this because it's so over the top. It's just like if we hear a haunting that is so completely over the top, I have a hard time believing it because I know you guys have been in haunted locations and had experiences. We've been in haunted locations and had experiences. I've never seen somebody picked up and thrown across a room, but people say that it's happened to them. I haven't seen a full-bodied apparition, but people have seen it. So it's just when something is like so over the top, it's harder for me to believe. And so when you like watching this movie, you're just thinking all of this is a bunch of BS and it's just made up for a movie because nothing like this would ever happen in real life. But then you look at the facts behind the story and you're like, well, that did happen. So what was that? How did that happen? Was it something demonic?
I have had my hair pulled. I don't remember where we was on. Where was that, babe? Do you remember?
The
It was on a big stage.
Sally House?
Cincinnati Music Hall.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I was standing there, was like, everybody was like this way, and I was back this way, and my head just went back like that. And I was like, what the hell? And I was like, Jerry, something just pulled my hair. And there was like nobody behind me at all. Nobody. So that
They
was
like
that
the
freaked
color.
me out. Maybe you think I just did. I think it was pink at the
They
time.
like the color.
It scared the turd out of me. I know that.
Did you just say scared the turd out of you?
I know I did, right? I did.
and there you could say, oh, that was a demon. Or was it just because the other thing is, let's say these kids had some spirits that were hanging out with them. Is it possible that a spirit could, like you said, Jerry, how are you defying the law of physics that way? Just like the story I read with this woman. How is a 5'2", 80-pound woman able to snap a straitjacket, pull a pew up out of the ground, and get rid of all of these men that are holding her down? Is it possible that there's a ghost who, like, did he lift the kid up and help him over the wall?
Yeah.
And now, is it just ghosts that are spirits helping to do something? I don't know.
I think the strength thing is easier to accept because you've always heard about this person
Adrenaline
lifts a
rush, yeah.
car up off of the
Yep.
kid in a moment. But that's different than being able to, stand on the ceiling. I mean, unless you're Lionel Richie or something.
Good grief.
Dancing on the ceiling. Oh.
That's right. He's Lionel Richie. He can do anything.
I mean, the good news is in the end, with both the movie and the real life story, there doesn't seem to be any more demonic activity happening for this family. She gets her kids back and hopefully they've lived happily ever after. We haven't heard anything else bad coming from them.
No, I would love to. I'd love to know what's happened since then.
I mean,
Maybe
do you think
somebody
the
will catch
youngest
up with her.
one what, like, would remember all that, or
Yeah,
when
I'm
he
sure
did
he
it?
would. He
think
wasn't
so.
that young.
Think so?
Yeah.
That's something to have to live with and think about the rest of your life.
We just,
that's what
I just wrote a story for us to do this Sunday, and it was all this crazy stuff that happened. And the little boy was 4 years old when the majority of it happened, and his mother said years later he remembered every bit of it still. So
Oh, whoa.
Wow.
I just can't imagine
That's
that.
unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, I think his name was Roland or something. I can't remember, but the one that is behind The Exorcist. And, he remembered everything after that. And you just imagine what that must be like, especially once everybody knew who was actually the real person behind it.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that they constantly worry that it's going to happen again, or they're afraid what if this happens to me again? And
I'm sure
I can't
that's
imagine.
a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that's so scary.
I mean, I definitely would be, because not only is it something that was always kind of taught to me in church, but even the Bible says that when that spirit comes out, make sure you clean that house, which is, your body, your house,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
or that spirit will come back and it'll bring some others with them. And so, yeah, if I had been in that kind of a place, I would be a little bit afraid that something else was going to come after me again.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think it's said that if a spirit leaves, when it comes back, it brings 7 more. Yeah,
Yes, sure. Yeah, I think you're right.
Well,
Well,
they
let's
don't
just
know
hope
the
we
real
never
folks.
run into any.
That's what I said. Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying they all need to pitch in on the rent.
Well, and if they're going to hang out in here, could you take care of some of the like yucko stuff? Like, can I take a nap while you're working, or?
That's
Cleaning the
right.
toilets, washing the laundry. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're going to have to chip in. You can't hang for free.
That's kind of like the multiple personality thing. I'd be like, I don't mind having multiple personalities if they do all the work and I can kind of hang out and just have a good time.
That's
Crazy.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to lock her up.
Well, guys, this was a fun discussion.
I thought it would be interesting. I'm like, yeah, we could share stories on each side, but I was like, it'd be I think people would, it's totally different than anything that we've done before. And I'm like, I think people might actually enjoy just hearing us, picking each other's brains about demon possession and movies. And everybody who listens to us likes horror movies. So of course they want to hear about a horror movie, and I would recommend watching it. I thought it was entertaining.
Yeah, it was good. I just saw, a little while ago, one of my friends said, hey, he watched it yesterday, and he said he really enjoyed it. But he was like, kind of like I was, and maybe you were, that I had no idea that was where that was going at all. All I knew is that she was really mean.
Right.
That's all, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I was like, dang
it
it.
definitely catches you off guard at the beginning, the way she's
Yeah.
talking to the kids and cussing at them and all that.
I feel so bad for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Especially as mothers.
Yeah.
She'd have
Not
made me miss
okay.
my mom. She reminded me a lot of my mom. I'm just
See
kidding.
what?
Oh boy.
Paulley.
That's a whole nother can of
You
worms.
had your first paranormal experiences. So, hey, maybe that basket getting thrown was a
Yep.
demon.
I've said this before. I didn't realize it until years later after really studying on stuff. I do think that a lot of the stuff that happened around the house was my mother's mental state causing it rather than an actual spirit or what have you. So I think there was a lot to that.
Yeah, could be.
That's a really good point, because I hadn't really thought about that. Because, like, I said earlier that some people might have blamed demon possession on mental illness or vice versa, that somebody did have mental illness and they were calling it a demon. And it does make you wonder, sometimes if those things don't go hand in hand, and that's why you're having stuff that's manifesting or what have you.
Yep.
Mm.
Well, ladies, it's
Yeah.
been an absolute pleasure. Tell
It
everybody
always is.
who might be listening on our end how they can keep up with History Goes Bump.
If you just go to historygoesbump.com, that's our website. It has all the links to all of our stuff there, or just Google History Goes Bump on any of the social media. Search it. You'll find us. We're everywhere. How about you, Jerry? Where can they find out about you guys?
Just Google us. It's not that hard.
On the toilet.
Hey,
Everybody
Diane,
find out about.
Diane, you were doing a podcast at one point in time that was more of a religious aspect.
Yes.
Are you still
is.
doing that?
Yes, it's called The Ghost in You, and it's kind of a double entendre, I guess you could call it. Like, the ghost in you would be your spirit that's in you, but also as a Christian, we believe we have the Holy Spirit in us. So I like to look at the supernatural, the weird, the odd that's in the Bible. And for a while I was doing it a lot, but as you know, Jerry, when you're got a lot of other stuff to do with the podcast and everything, it's harder to do that's like my passion project. So I throw a new one up every couple of months over there.
So again, what's the name?
The Ghost in You.
So go check that one out. I hadn't had a chance to listen recently, but I used to listen every time you dropped an episode, and I found it completely fascinating. That's why when you suggested this, I was like, hey, this is going to be kind of like her other podcast as opposed to History Goes Bump. But
yeah, because I have very unique, I call it fringe, and they call it like fringe Christianity, but I actually think it's like the real stuff and the way we are supposed to interpret stuff. But as I said earlier, the church doesn't like to look at that stuff for some reason. And so they kind of put it away somewhere else. It's like, well, Goliath was in the Bible. What do you think he was? And some of them will say, oh, well, he was probably like 6'9". Because a 6'9" guy, I am only 5'4", so they are kind of a giant to me, but I'm thinking if they're referring to them being a giant, they're probably pretty big.
She's fun sized.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
So is Tracy.
We're fun sized.
Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on with us. And it was an absolute blast. And we'll have to do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Sounds
Thank you,
good.
Jerry and Tracy.
Thanks, you
You're
guys.
welcome. I love you guys.
Love you too. Have a good one.
You too.
I want to thank you guys for joining us for this paranormal conversation. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye.